I'm Nupur Chawla, teaching English literature at Maitri College, Delhi University. This lecture is the second part of the lecture, the English essay Eliza Haywood. And if we look at the lecture as part of the ongoing series, it is a part of the series on the English essay. So in the previous part of this lecture, we discussed what does this term mean, what do we mean by the English essay, how is it different from the usual understanding of the word, or let's say our day-to-day usage of the word. We discussed that how this is an important a form of expression in the English literary history that flourished in the late 17th and early 18th century. Thereafter, we talked about some of the seminal features of this form of expression, and some of them include that how at the center the author creates a persona or a character that we see appear in almost all the versions of the essay. Next, we said that this is this form of expression is the way for the author to present his or her views or analysis or observations of the times. So therefore, the personal perspective and social critique come together in this form. Personal perspective, why? Because it's the persona or the character through whom or through the lens of whom these observations or analysis are made. Thereafter, we talked about some of the common themes of the of this form of expression, and over there also we discussed that how, while on the one hand some of the serious issues or topics such as war, gender, and other such serious concerns are taken up for analysis, while at the same time what is also discussed is that some of the primary value systems, the idea of aesthetic, the idea of taste also become a matter of discussion, right? And then we ended the previous lecture by with a comment that how the English essay then can be viewed as a precursor to the novel form, and also at the same time a precursor to modern criticism as well, because it was one of the ways to to actually inculcate critical thinking amongst people of the time, right? So now with this backdrop or background of this style of writing, let us understand the first one of the first women essays that was writing in the 18th century, that is Eliza Haywood. Now she has been a subject of incredible interest for a lot of scholars, even though this came in slightly late, around the 19th century, because as we all are aware that around that time in the 18th century, the way society was, it was incredibly patriarchal. It was a society that did not hold much promise for women, particularly in intellectual and social spheres. They were primarily relegated to the domestic spheres. That's where they were confined. So at such a time then, to have a woman writing the essays was of quite an importance, was quite a significant achievement, right? So therefore we chose to discuss Eliza Haywood today. So Eliza Haywood was also known as Eliza Fowler. She was born in 1693, that is late 17th century, and was around till 1756, which is middle of the 18th century, and she wrote over 70 works, including fiction, drama, translations, poetry, conduct literature, and periodicals. She was also an actress, playwright, poet, and a translator. Now you see, our very first introduction to Eliza Haywood is such that she was a very dynamic personality. Somebody who has written over 70 works. Imagine the kind of courage that this woman stands for, that this woman had, that defying all social conventions, she did what she felt passionate about, right? So, and at the same time, she wasn't just a writer, but at the same time she was also an actress. She not only performed on stage, she also wrote plays, she wrote poetry, she also wrote essays, right? So therefore, we are dealing with an individual of immense promise in that sense, right? So if someone's interested, you may also look up other works by Eliza Haywood apart from the essays which are going to be in discussion today. Now you see, as we had just now discussed, and also at some length we talked about it in the previous lecture, that at the center of all these essays are a persona or a character created by the author. So now here Eliza Haywood, she created a persona that was called the female spectator, right? And in the persona that she created, that is the female spectator, in her words, she received education, and quote begins, more liberal than is ordinarily allowed to persons of my gender, unquote. So what's happening here? Two things. First, I would like to very briefly comment on the word female spectator, and then we will reflect on what has just been said. We said that how the word spectator recalls Steele's a character persona that was created by him, right? So Haywood then creates a female spectator, which means what? That if Steele, Addison and Steele's spectator was a male, it presented a male perspective to events in society. Haywood created a female equivalent of the same, but not to say that she copied what they were doing, but I would say that she was inspired by them, and this was her contribution to the times, that she brought to the fore the perspective or the viewpoint of women as well, and thereby making a statement that how women were not just supposed to have opinions in matters of the house, in matters of the domestic affairs, but they were also equally very much capable of critical thinking, analyzing, understanding, and expressing all of these in very eloquent terms. So one can say that this is a very, I would say, a very splendid move by Haywood in the late 17th century. More than anything else, it was quite ahead of its times, right? So coming back then, you see, so in her words, so in one of the essays that she has written, she gives her persona these words, and she says that the education that she received was much more liberal than is ordinarily allowed to persons of my gender. So this in itself also establishes that how what was the condition of women at that time, and for a female spectator to exist, for an Eliza Haywood to exist, what kind of a distinction that was. Now in the 1740s, Eliza Haywood gained a reputation as a periodical essayist with the publication The Female Spectator, that was published from April 1744 to 1746, and The Parrot, that was published from August 1746 to October 1746. So just a while ago, when we were introducing Haywood, we said that she's a playwright, she's a poet, she's a translator, even an actress, etc. So because she did so much, But because we are focusing on her as an essayist, so it was around the 1740s, which is the middle of the 18th century, that she gained reputation as a periodical essayist. And she came up with two publications: the Female Spectator, that was published for 2 years, and the Parrot, that was published for a few months in 1746. Now, I know that these terms are very, very interesting. While we have understood, where the word the Female Spectator come from, we'll also briefly reflect on what the Parrot also means. But just to give you a sense, here on your screens you will be able to see now the cover page of Female Spectator. Just like in the beginning of the lecture we had looked at the cover page of the Tatler, it is pretty much along similar lines. If you notice that to the left hand side is an image, to the right hand side is the title of the publication, and then place of publication, etc. But what is different, of course, is that here or to the left you see three women across the table talking, and this in a way also is a very interesting depiction, which pictorially tells us that what this essay was about, right? It was in the voice of a woman, and it was meant to be read by women as well, right? So that's the vision of this essay, that it presents ideas of women, their observations is what it carries, and it also addresses a female audience, right? Now, a lot of times, quite interestingly, Eliza Haywood is dubbed as an Addison in petticoats by later critics. Now, she continued the original objective of the essayists, that is, reforming the minds and manners of the times. Her periodical papers carried moralistic precepts upon stories of adultery, gambling, among other things. Two important points made here. She was dubbed as an Addison in petticoats. What does it mean? That what she was doing was very similar to what Addison did, but only from a woman's perspective, right? So that's why an Addison in petticoats. I know that such a phrase needs to be taken with a pinch of salt, because if we are talking about her, but we are talking about her in terms of another male essayist, somewhere we are discounting her originality, which might also deserve that kind of attention. But well, that's for discussion at another moment. But when we notice that what exactly was the content of the Female Spectator, did it have similar themes? Did it have similar ideas as compared to the other essays of the times? Yes. So you see, we were discussing that how social critique was one of the foremost intents of these essays. So likewise, reforming the minds and manners of the people of the times was also one of the defining features, or let's say the intents of the of Eliza Haywood as well. Now the other thing is that it carried moralistic precepts upon stories of adultery. So what she would do would be, she would bring to us stories of adulteries, gambling, etc. Now you see all these events in society, all these circumstances in society, which of course exist at all points of time. So Eliza Haywood would pick out would pick on these instances, and while discussing stories of adultery, the point of discussion was to communicate moralistic precepts, to share some kind of a moral in order to reform the people, right? So that people understood the relevance, or let's say maybe even the the shortcomings of such endeavors. So while the female spectator carried scandalous content, we just now discussed, it talked about adultery, gambling, etc. The Parrot, that was the other publication by Haywood, reported on explicitly political material. Now, as I just now said that, we will also think about the word, the parrot. The parrot, what is it supposed to do? Now, you see, these are all terms which are very carefully chosen. If you notice, a parrot always perches on a tree, slightly high up on the branch, right? And from there, it gets that view of what's going on around. So when you are stationed or when you are positioned slightly higher up, then you have that kind of quote unquote vantage point, to observe everything and everyone around you. And the other, association with the word parrot is that it speaks, right? It is known to talk. So that's why a very interesting, but at the same time quite a relevant, term given to the publication by Haywood, that is the parrot. So while the female spectator carried scandalous content, the parrot reported on explicitly political material. Now, as we just now mentioned a while ago, that the female spectator is amongst the first periodicals in English written by women for women, and it was published anonymously. Now, this fact that it was published anonymously also indicates what? That how women around the time, it wasn't very easy for them to express themselves, right? The doors weren't quite open for them to come out in public and express. So therefore, the female spectator, we say, is modeled on the Spectator that was by Joseph Addison and Richard Steele. It differs from its inspiration in that it speaks exclusively from a female viewpoint. That's why in the title itself, the female spectator. Now, having looked at briefly and having understood what Eliza Haywood was doing in the 18th century, having situated her in the middle of the essay tradition, let us take a look at a few excerpts from these essays. Right now, first we will look at an excerpt from the female spectator, right? And I'll just first read out and then we'll discuss it. Quote begins, Martesia, that's the name of a woman that she is talking about. Martesia, the wonder and delight of all who saw or heard her, gave the admiring world the greatest expectations that she would one day be no less celebrated for all those virtues which render amiable the conjugal state than she at that time was for every other perfection that do honour to the gender. Yet how, alas, did all these charming hopes vanish into air? Unquote. So let's first understand this little initial segment of, this is the beginning of the first, section of the female spectator. And this immediately puts into perspective all that we have talked about so far. It's talking about a woman, right? What kind of a woman? Look at the way this woman is described, that she had all the virtues that would render a woman amiable in the conjugal state. Means that she had the virtues that anybody would expect a woman to have at that time, who would then be also considered to be very, very good a match for a man. So once again, going back, we discussed that how the essays were meant for social instruction. So while they will talk about virtues, while they will talk about what are the values that we all need to live by, at the same time they will also comment on what is actually happening. So therefore, you see, the choice of character is also very, very crucial here by the female spectator. She chooses this woman who on the outside has this veneer of a very, very respectable, virtuous young woman who everybody would admire, and she would be the perfect match for anybody to settle down with, right? And towards the end, look at how this excerpt ends. It says, "Yet how, alas, did all these charming hopes vanish into air." Now, why is this last sentence important? It creates a kind of a, I would say, curiosity. That first it sets up the character who is incredibly virtuous, and then there's a sudden turnaround, which is what? That all these charming hopes vanished into air. And there's a slight pause after that. So, what does it mean? That the reader is immediately drawn to what is being said. Remember, the second important point that we discussed about the female spectator. Not only is it for social critique, but at the same time, it also talked about scandalous events. And through that, it meant to provide instruction for the people. So, that this last sentence puts it in perspective, that how all these charming virtues vanished into air. So, what happened? Let's look at that next. Quote begins, "Many noble youths, her equals in birth and fortune, watched her increase of years for declaring a passion which they feared as yet would be rejected by those who had the disposal of her. But what their respect and timidity forbade them to attempt, a more daring and unsuspected rival ventured at and succeeded in." Now, what does it mean? That here was a virtuous woman, and there were multiple eligible men who were waiting to win her favor, right? But the female spectator says that a more daring and an unsuspected rival, unsuspected, nobody would have thought of this man entering on the scene, but this person comes on scene who then gets the attention of the woman, that is Martizia, right? So, look at the way this incident is even narrated with a lot of it generates a lot of curiosity, it generates a lot of spice. You see, that gives us a flavor of this particular essay by Eliza Haywood, and that's why we also know that it kind of was in publication for 2 years, while the Parrot lasted for a few months. Anyway, let's look at the last part of this particular section. Now, her inexperienced heart approved his person and was pleased with the protestations he made her of it. But soon, too soon, the fleeting pleasures fled, and in their room anguish and bitterness of heart succeeded, unquote. So, what happened? This quote unquote unsuspected rival who had come and won the heart of Martizia is also not able to hold her attention for too long. It says, but soon, too soon, the fleeting pleasures fled, and in their room anguish, bitterness of heart succeeded. But look at the word. So while she does say, or she does talk about the event, that how the woman very quickly shifted her preference away from the man, but if you look at the language very carefully, it says her unexperienced heart, right? Once again, there is a comment being made, and that's what we talked about, that how there that the essay then would while they would comment on what's going on in the times, but they would also bring to mind the idea of instruction as well. Now, if you just read a bit more of this, it says the house where their acquaintance first began was now the scene of their future meetings. The mistress of it was too great a friend to gallantry herself to be an interruption to the happiness they enjoyed in entertaining each other without witnesses. How weak, now this is to be very, very carefully read. How weak is virtue when love and opportunity combine. Though no woman could have more refined and delicate notions than Martisia, yet all were ineffectual against the solicitations of her adored Clitander. Unquote. Now, this I would say is the crux of this first short section that we have talked about of the Spectator. Now, what is she saying? That the first man that was interested in her, she changed her heart. But then she came across another, and she started to spend her time with him. And look at the comment that the Spectator comes with. She says, how weak is virtue when love and opportunity combine. So virtue takes a back seat. Why virtue takes a back seat? She leaves one man for another. What is the theme? Adultery. Again, go back to the initial part of the lecture, right? How weak is virtue when love and opportunity combine. Though no woman could have more refined notions than Martisia, yet all were ineffectual. So, the female spectator is making us realize that no matter how virtuous, how high and mighty Martisia was, but even she fell prey. Even her virtue became weak in the event of love and opportunity. So, making people aware that how virtue should be, guarded quite strongly in events of love and opportunity. So, you see, we notice here that how while there's a, one of the scandal being discussed by the female spectator, second, we discussed, we notice the kind of language that she uses creates curiosity, is very, chatty, it is, draws the reader in because that's what it is meant to do. But at the same time, also, so while, appealing to people's desire to know about others' lives, but at the same time also talking about virtue. Why? Because social critique and correcting the wrongs was one of the intentions of 18th century writing. And we see that in this little excerpt from The Female Spectator by Eliza Haywood, right? So I hope that, we now have a sense of what these essays were doing. Even though we could have, gone on to discuss the parrot as well, but perhaps we could do it next time. But I really hope that from this little excerpt that we have discussed today, it will encourage you to go out and read other essays by Eliza Haywood as well. Thank you.